Hi friends, it's Anne here, and today's video is my proper introduction for my Pan That palette for 2022. So if you watched my finale for my Pan That palette for last year, you saw a sneak peek of this already. But this is my proper introduction because I am doing a Pan That palette and I'm also doing a palette roulette for the whole year. So let's first talk about what I'm panning. Let's first talk about the eyeshadow palette. So the eyeshadow palette that I've chosen is the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little nervous. I'm nervous on panning this. I know that these are very hard pressed shadows. As somebody else also pointed out, they're pretty deep shadows. So we're just gonna give her a whirl and see how far we can get with this. I don't have any anticipation of finishing any shadows in here, but I definitely think I can hit pan on some of these lighter shades, like this shade, maybe this shade, and this shade, and then I think I can probably get some good dips in some of the other shades. Pan in every palette would be, a pan in every pan, I guess. A pan in every eyeshadow would be nice, but I don't have expectations for that. So yeah, we're just gonna see how this is gonna go. This is like one of the oldest palettes that I have, and while I like it, it's not my favorite. I like the Bonbons one a bit more. I was contemplating putting that in the project, but I think I just want to give this one last hurrah, and then this one is going to be decluttered from my collection. I think the quality is going on this one as well. I don't think the quality, I said this in my last video, I don't know if it's just because this is getting older, so the quality of it is changing, or we've just had so many newer eyeshadows with better formulations that this formulation now is like, oh, it's not that great. But yeah, so that's the palette. This is where we're starting at. I'll also throw in a picture of the swatches. Even though some of the shadows look colorful, pretty much everything but two, well, I shouldn't say everything but two, but most of them just turn out brown, which is kind of like a shame because it does look like it has a bit more variety than what it actually does. And then the face palette I chose, which is going to drive me crazy because the reflection and all the fingerprints, is the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Edit Volume 4. So this one is from 2018. And I chose this one because I baby it. I don't really use it, and it's time. Like, I've had this since October 2018, and it looks fairly pristine. It doesn't look like I've used a whole lot. I think I said this in my last video. This shade, the dim light shade, definitely has the most usage, and I have finished not a full size, but a single mini of the dim light. I really like dim light. I know some people like it as like a bronzer. It's like a perfect shade for me for all over my face. Right now I'm a bit pale, so I think I'm going to mix the two finishing powders together. And I think I can finish the bronzer in here. I'm not going to get too fussed about the blushes, but I'd like to at least see them go down a little bit more. This won't be decluttered at the end of the year. I will continue this. I want to try and finish all of it. And like I said in my last video, the only one that I'm kind of okay if I don't finish is this blush in the middle. But everything else, I think I can finish. I've decided we're just going to do photographs of the palettes because I think the weights are going to be a challenge. So the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette is too heavy for my jewelry weight, so the one that gives you the 0.00, so I can only weigh it on my kitchen scale. We saw how well that went with the Carly Bible palette, i.e. not at all. And I might weigh it at the very end of the year to see if there's a difference, but I'm not going to weigh it regularly. Same with the Hourglass one. Those powders are so fine that I'm not sure the weight is going to change a whole lot, and it might be a bit demotivating for me. So we're just not going to weigh them, and we're just going to rely on like visual evidence for progress. So to add on to this, I sort of did this 2 years ago, and I know other people have done this. It's not original, but I'm doing basically a palette roulette. I know I'm doing this in a similar way to what Leah McDonald was doing with her Shot My Stashes. She was using a random number generator. I'm using the Tiny Decisions app. Yeah, words. Ruth put me onto that app, and I think it looks really fun. It's like a Wheel of Fortune wheel, so it's pretty fun. So what I've discovered is I have about 60-ish palettes, and some are really small and some are bigger. So I was also kind of looking at number of eyeshadows, and in total I have to use about 50 eyeshadows a month to go through all the palettes. So I hope that makes sense. I'm gonna kind of have to balance what it picks to make sure I have around 50 eyeshadows selected with the various palettes. I hope that makes sense. I'm not gonna fuss too much if I'm over by a couple or below by a couple, but around 50 eyeshadows. So if I do like the roulette and it picks a big palette, and then I do it again and it picks another big palette, I'm gonna have to like figure out how is that going to balance with everything else, because some of my palettes are really, really small. I have a lot of 4-pan palettes. I have at least 6 or 8 of those, so it's going to be tricky to balance it all out, but we're going to try. We'll see how this goes. So I don't know. I tried screen recording. I'm hoping it worked, and if it didn't, you can imagine what the little tiny app looked like. And the first palette it picked out was the Morphe Kathleen Lights palette, which actually I feel like is a great palette for fall and winter, so I'm happy it picked this out. I don't think I've used this. I think I used this a couple months ago, and that's the last time I've used it. This was another candidate for Pan That palette, so it might come back in the future as a Pan That palette, but I do really like this palette. The only Morphe palette I think I have, which I'm fine with. And I do like it has like sort of some cool tones. It does have a lot of warm tones, but it's very everyday, easy to wear, and easy to pair with other palettes. The second palette it picked was the BH Zodiac palette, which I was kind of a little disappointed because I've just been using this like in the month of December. But I'll be honest, not using it a whole lot. So this gives me an opportunity to keep going with it, because some of these shadows, I sort of gear towards using some shadows more than others. Like, I was deciding to play with some of these, and I was like, oh, that Aquarius shade is really nice. And so is this, I think it was this Gemini shade that I sort of did as like a topper, and it gave me this really cool, I had sort of like a taupe cool eyeshadow look going on, and then I threw this on top, and it gave me like almost like a wintry, icy, magical touch to it that I was like, oh, that's really pretty. I liked that. I generally gravitate towards just using these pink shades, so I need to branch out a little bit more and use some of the other shades in this palette. So that brought me up to, I think, 40 eyeshadows. So I basically only had room for 10 more. Then it pulled up the Ipsy NYX little trio. This was a collaboration between Ipsy and NYX. I like this little trio. It's not bad for travel. It's pretty boring. Like the shimmer, they're not super shimmery. So again, a good palette that I can sort of just use in conjunction with other palettes. Yeah, like you can see, they're not the greatest, but they're fine. It's a fine little palette that you're gonna get a really basic look out of. Again, that's been one that I've contemplated like hitting. If I could hit pan in like the first 2 shades, and I might declutter that palette. And then so that brought me up to 43 shades. So I had room for 7 more, and the palette that it picked was the CoverGirl True Naked Roses palette, which technically has 8 shadows, which puts me over by 1, but 51 shadows, like I said, I'm okay with 51 shadows. So this is the other palette. I like this palette. I think it's really, really good. I did a whole video comparing this to the e.l.f. Naked Nude Rose palette. No, it's not Naked. I think it's Nude Rose or something like that. And they're very, very similar. Like, this is kind of the color scheme that I gravitate towards. I think I have like 3 palettes that are very similar to this color scheme. But yeah, the quality of this one's pretty good. Again, it's another candidate potentially for panning in the future. Again, a really old palette. This is probably one of my oldest palettes that I have in my collection. So yeah, I've got those marked down as my January palettes. What I hope to do is when I come back in February, show maybe a couple of looks that I created over the month with those palettes, and then we'll pick new ones. And then, so in the Tiny Decision app, I'm going to remove those 4 palettes, and so it won't be able to pick them again, and we'll have a smaller set to work from for the next month. So yeah, I hope this works out. I felt like last year, even though I was doing Shop My Stash, there was definitely a few palettes that I neglected or didn't use a whole lot. So I'm hoping this will help me just really feel like I've used my collection properly. I've gotten through everything, as well as panning the palette that I picked, the Chocolate Bar palette. So anyway, I hope you liked this little introduction to my Pan That palette and palette roulette for 2022. If you like this video, feel free to give it a little thumbs up down below. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you subscribe to my channel here in Toronto, Canada. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you sometime soon. Bye.